I was in London. I think Scott Lauber was in London. I had a little jet lag. It was less than I thought. I'm feeling okay today. I'm all right. Yesterday I was struggling a little bit. I did okay over there. When I got there, I didn't sleep all that much, and I just kind of powered through the day. But, Scott, the team that looked like they had jet lag last night wasn't the Phillies. It was the Red Sox. So this was not an ideal week for the Phillies. You know, you're in London. You're throwing off your routines, your jet lag. You got to go to Boston. Then you got to go to Baltimore this weekend. This looked like it was going to be a tough week here, and it starts off with a bang.
Yeah, it started off well, Mike. So let me ask you. So you said you slept or you didn't sleep once you got there. You powered through.
I got there at 7 in the morning. Yes.
When did you fly back?
I flew back, Monday at 12:30, so I got back. When I landed here, it was Monday at 3:30.
Okay, so you were just a little bit, I think, behind me. I was home around Monday at 1:30. So what'd you do? Did you just – because I'm with you. Like, I actually felt pretty good. Didn't really feel much jet lag. So I'm curious, like, did you just kind of, like, go through the rest of the day and then go to sleep normal time?
I got off the plane, got picked up, got home, changed my clothes, and went and coached my baseball team's practice.
I think that's the key. I think you've got to just kind of like just do it.
Yep.
Just keep going. And
I followed the same philosophy that I did when I went there, was just power through and try to make it to a normal time. And yesterday I was a little dragging and I was cranky and I was short with people. But today I feel better.
Now I'll tell you what the Phillies were told, because they flew overnight to London. So they were told, power through, stay awake, go through your day, go to sleep normal time, and you'll be all right. And I talked to players who said that's what they did, and they felt fine. Obviously, they played well they played well, really, I thought, both games, but they played a really crisp game, the first game in particular. So I think it worked. Now, they were told on the way home, they left right after the game on Sunday. They flew they took essentially a night flight. When they landed in Boston, it was I believe it was 10 or 11 p.m. Eastern time, and they were told just go to sleep normal time. Just go to sleep when you get there, but try not to sleep on the plane. And I'm not in Boston. I came home from London, but look, they played well last night. They played crisp game last night. It helps when you have Zach Wheeler pitch the way he did, but it certainly looked as though from a sort of like managing the trip as far as maximizing their sleep or getting sleep when they should, that they did it correctly. And I was curious too, I still am. How do they make it through the week here? Because it's such a disruption in the normal routine. I am curious to see as they go through the week how the bullpen looks, because the relievers in particular have gotten less work than usual. Starters, from my understanding, Wheeler had 8 days rest. He threw 2 bullpens in between. That's what Sanchez did. It's what Nola did. So we'll see how they look the next 2 nights. But, so far so good. I mean, I do know that they put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into kind of researching this trip. Dombrowski had done it before in 2019 with the Red Sox. So did the trainer, Paul Buchheit, who worked for the Red Sox in 2019. So they kind of had experience with this. They got input from multiple departments, nutrition, strength and conditioning, et cetera, about what players should do. And I think put together a plan that they felt pretty confident in. And so far, so good. They've looked okay on both ends.
Yeah, I it's funny. I was laughing yesterday. I said, I wish the Phillies would have shared their sleep patterns and that with everybody, so we could have all kind of been on the same sleep schedule. But yeah, I feel like, and then you talked about the bullpen thing. Wheeler, they mentioned on the broadcast, 88 pitches, and you're thinking he doesn't have to come out of this game. But I think, is that going to be something, Rob? If this lead is cushioned in the 8 to 12 game range for most of the summer, we're not going to take that for granted that it will. But is that going to be something that Rob Thompson's going to have to kind of manage? Of how late does he want these guys going into games, even if they can continue going?
Yeah, no question. I've thought this for a little while now, and I'll continue to hammer this point. On Inquirer.com and whatnot, and on social media. But I really think it's interesting to sort of see how they respond or how they react to playing from ahead. The Phillies the last 2 years have not been front runners. They got off to poor starts. They kind of had to put the foot to the pedal in June to get back into the wild card race, and then to kind of jockey for wild card positioning because the division was out of their reach by June both years. This year it's the opposite. Not only are they leading the division, but they've opened up this big lead. And, they've got anywhere you look, any of these projection models, they've got like a 99% chance of making the playoffs and high 90s probability of winning the division. And so where this is going to go. Where it's going to end up. It's going to end up in October, and they are absolutely engineered for the playoffs, geared for the playoffs. And so if October is what really matters, how do they handle the pitching staff, both the starting staff and the relievers? How do they handle look, I'm sure we'll talk about JT Realmuto, but prior to yesterday's news, I think it was an open question. How do you handle his workload? How do you handle your bench? How do you handle, getting guys the rest that they need? And, every time the lineup comes out before a game and, I post the lineup on Twitter, inevitably anytime like, Stott is sitting or anytime there's a name in there that's not ordinarily in there, like a Whit Merrifield has been a frequent target, right? You get that clap back from fans who are like, what are they doing? What's with this lineup? And you have to understand that when you play every day for 6 months, you have to get everybody involved. You have to get your starters proper rest. And especially when, all you're doing is just aiming for October, gearing for October, you're going to get there. It's almost a foregone conclusion now. How do you take the next 2+ months, 2.5 months, and just make sure that everybody gets the rest they need so that when they get, and not too much either, so that when they get to October, they're kind of functioning at peak, at their peak level. So,
and then, by the way, you're likely going to have to take a week off in October, or at least a few days off, if you're this is something that they haven't had to deal with. They've been the team, and the Braves have complained about this. It's pretty outwardly the last couple of years, that they didn't like the way it was. It seemingly the Braves. I kind of thought this from the beginning. They didn't have a lot of interest in winning the division this year.
Well, that I'm not so sure about because I think it's the Braves. It's in their. It's really kind of in their DNA, and it has been for generations now. That the Braves are very much a team that cares about stacking division titles and winning the regular season, and they value the regular season as much as any organization that I know. And so, I do think that they absolutely went into the season thinking that they wanted to win their 7th consecutive division title. But I do think that the last 2 years were a little bit of a, that there was a little bit of a wake-up call in that, look, the regular season, for better or worse, does not mean everything anymore the way it used to. And so you don't have to win your division to get in. And if you win your division with 104 wins or whatever it was that they had last year, it's quite an accomplishment. But at the same time, like if you're out there to win World Series, it's not the only way to do it. It's not the only route to take. So I do think that there is that kind of recalibration of things. And so, if you're the Braves and you're kind of in the Phillies position the last couple of years, you can take solace in the fact that your season's not a lost cause. You're very much still in the playoff mix, and you can get in and you can go deep if you get in and get hot at the right time. So, but I do think just as much as the Phillies, like the last 2 years would have been enough for the Phillies to sort of go into the season thinking, division title, whatever, we just want to make the playoffs. I think that they were very focused on trying to win the division this year and making their road a little easier.
Talking with Scott Lauber for the Philadelphia Inquirer, covers the Phillies. There's a lot to you a couple names I want to get your thoughts on. Merrifield was the guy they brought in who was something that seemingly they didn't have, right? That's why they get this guy. Hey, he's the guy we just don't have. He's multiple positions. He puts the ball in play, gets on base. He's got a lot of speed. It hasn't worked out. Have they just given up on him? Because they've had opportunities, Scott, to kind of let him kind of get going. I mean, he doesn't have to platoon with David Dahl. I know Dave's had a good start here, but for God's sakes, if you're telling Whit Merrifield, hey, you're platooning with Dave Dahl, what are you telling him? Are they like done giving him chances here? Are you surprised at how they've handled him?
A little bit. I mean, the one that I will say I was surprised about was when Trey Turner got hurt. I thought, okay, their first impulse would be to put Sosa at short and let that play out a little bit, and then ultimately what they would wind up doing would be sliding Stott over to short and have Merrifield play second. Kind of thought that was their best alignment in Trey Turner's absence, and I think a couple of things happened. First of all, Sosa just did not stop hitting for about a month and really made it impossible to take him out of the lineup. And secondly, Whit Merrifield didn't start hitting. And so it was not a difficult decision to continue on with Sosa at short and Stott at second, where, by the way, he's a Gold Glove candidate again this year, Stott. So they didn't want to disrupt that too much. Even though he's a natural shortstop and all of that, I think he's really kind of settled in as a very good second baseman. So I was a little bit surprised, though, that Merrifield didn't get more of a chance to play every day when Turner went down. I don't think they've given up on it by any means. I do think they value the versatility. They value the fact that he could play different positions, even though it's been largely left field, at least lately. And like you said, in kind of a platoon with David Dahl, I do think that they value the fact that Merrifield can bounce all around the field. I think also that it's taken Merrifield a little bit of time to figure out how to handle not playing almost every day. He's been really an everyday player his whole career. He was an all-star with the look. He was an all-star last year with the Blue Jays, and he's been an everyday guy. It's difficult for a lot of guys who've been everyday guys their whole careers to sort of dial it back and become part-time players. They've got to get used to a new routine. Pinch hitting is about as difficult a thing as there is to do in the game. Come off the bench cold, especially nowadays where everyone in every bullpen throws 100 miles an hour. Come off the bench cold and have to face a guy throwing that hard. It's not easy, and it takes, I think, time to get accustomed to, and some guys never get accustomed to it. So I don't think that they've given up on it. I do think that, I think he had a good weekend in London. He really did. Not only did he hit the home run on Saturday, but he had an RBI hit on Sunday as well. I thought maybe that would be something that he could bring back with him and kind of feel a little bit more confident, and we'll see. Now, of course, they come back to the States and they get this run where they're facing consecutive righties. I think through the Baltimore series, they'll face 6 in a row. And so that pretty much puts Whit Merrifield on the bench again, after facing, like eight or nine lefties in the span of like 12 games. Now they're facing only righties. So bad timing for Merrifield there to not be able to get in the lineup. But I don't think they've given up on it. I think they're trying to figure out ways to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, because you just mentioned all the righties. I mean, so does this feel like it's like we're going to see Dave Dahl all week? And is it a straight platoon? Or, I mean, right-handers can hit right-handed. It's not the same as a lefty-lefty. It's not quite as, difficult for the lefties when they have to face a lefty. I mean, righties can, you could throw him in there. But do you think we'll see Dave Dahl the whole stretch here?
No, I think knowing Rob Thompson, he'll figure out how to get Merrifield in there. I know he doesn't want Merrifield to sit on the bench for a week straight coming out of London. So, when you face, and I don't have their splits in front of me, but tonight is Pivetta, I think, right? And then Houck is tomorrow. And then I'm sure I think they face Corbin Burns on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. And they'll face, I think they'll face Grayson Rodriguez. I'm sure that they're looking at those righties and figuring out, okay, which of those guys are toughest on righties? Which of those guys have more even splits? Where can we get Merrifield into the lineup where it's not a matchup disadvantage to have him face a righty? So, I mean, knowing Rob Thompson, I'm sure that they're figuring that out and that they'll figure out ways to get him a start or two during this week so that he doesn't get, the team doesn't get home next week and suddenly Whit Merrifield hasn't played in a week since the team was in London. So I know that they don't want to do that.
All right, Scott, you mentioned Real Muto. Let's kind of break. I was a little surprised to hear Dave Dombrowski say a month or so. That seemed like a pretty quick turnaround. I feel like when it first came out, everybody was throwing like 6 to 8 weeks in their mind, maybe thinking about Joel Embiid and that. But then he also mentioned, when he comes back, it should be catching right away. So do we take him for his word that it's going to be Marchand and Stubbs because they're going to get him back so quick?
Well, I thought when they announced the surgery. I thought it was telling that there was no timeline in the release, in the announcement. They usually do provide some sort of timetable. So, for example, when Christian Pache had similar surgery last year, I think they outlined a 4 to 6 week recovery timetable. They didn't have that. So then Dave Dombrowski comes out yesterday in Boston to talk to reporters, and he says about a month. I take him at his word on that one. I don't think that there's any reason why he would come out and suggest something quicker, something longer. If anything, you would err on the side of longer, and then if he comes back sooner, it's people are pleasantly surprised, as opposed to saying a month and it takes 6 weeks, and then everyone's wondering, has he had a setback? So when he was as specific as he was to say about a month, I take that as that's what the doctors are telling them now. He had the surgery today. I think we'll find out a little bit more later today about how that went. I guess it's possible, if it was a more complicated procedure, that it could be more than a month. They'll have maybe a firmer timeline today than they would have had yesterday. But I was actually surprised. I expected to hear, well, let him have the procedure first and then we'll have a timeline. So for him to say about a month, I take that at about a month.
I would agree with that. Go ahead.
That said, it doesn't do Dave Dombrowski any good to come out yesterday and say, I'll tell you, I called half the league already to ask about if their catcher is available. I mean, so it pretty much goes with the territory that what you would say in a situation like this is, we'll go with what we have. We'll go with Stubbs. We'll go with Marchand, and we'll roll with that for a month. We can get by. We have confidence in these two guys. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you're calling half the league to find out about catcher availability. So I do think that my assumption is that they're looking around. I do think that they have their eyes open to see, is there anybody out there who could be an upgrade over what they have internally, or who could add depth to what they have at AAA. So I did not expect to hear like, yeah, we're turning over every stone to find catching help. But I do think that they're probably out there looking for catching help.
Good stuff with Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Phillies down in Baltimore this weekend. Will Trey Turner be with them in the lineup?
I think it's possible. I spoke to him on Sunday in London, and he was getting closer. If you remember I guess it's like 2.5 weeks ago now, when they were in Colorado, he was ramping up his running and he felt some tightness. So I asked him in London if he felt like he was where he was at in Colorado before the setback, and he said yes, but probably a little bit ahead because he's not feeling that same tightness. So last week in London, they took him out. There was that field at London Stadium was spongy. It was a spongy turf, and they didn't want him running on that. So they took him out to a soccer field, which was adjacent to London Stadium, kind of like a practice field, which was grass, and he was able to do some running. I think he was going to ramp up that activity this week in Boston with an eye toward maybe being ready over the weekend in Baltimore. If it doesn't happen in Baltimore, I would expect it would happen when they get home at the beginning of next week. Either way, I think he's probably back within the week. And that should help because obviously you get his bat back in the lineup at the same time you subtract Real Mutos. You don't want injuries. Injuries are going to happen. You just don't want them to stack up on top of one another with your key guys. So that'll help to have him back and get him back in there. And again, they're in a position though where they don't have to rush this thing, so if they feel like the weekend in Baltimore, it would be helpful for him to just continue on this running progression and wait until they get home. Okay, fine. And if you want to wait another day or so once you get home, okay, fine. No rush. That's the advantage of having, a 10-game lead in the division and being 26 games over 500. You don't have to really kind of accelerate things too much. So I do think he's getting much closer though.
There's been a lot of talk about adding an outfielder, and obviously the trade thing, they're so far ahead. Would you concur that that's what it feels like, that they're, maybe Rojas isn't the guy, and maybe our left field platoon situation isn't great? How do you view that?
Yeah, I wrote about this last week on Inquirer.com. Castellanos had a good week last week. at home before they left for London. He had the walk-off hit and then the home run. He hit a home run in London. So maybe he's starting to turn a corner. Look, here's what I think. I think that there's, 5 or 6 weeks before the deadline. I think that they'll wait as long as they can before they make a move for a few reasons. Number one, if Castellanos gets hot, there's less of a need for an outfielder. Number two, I think the closer you get to the deadline, the lower the prices become. Because if you make a trade now, it's really kind of a seller's market. If you get closer to the deadline, maybe those sellers become a little bit less picky with what they're asking for. Maybe they drop their prices a little bit. I also think the market still has to take shape. Like, you have a handful of teams. I tell you, certainly the Yankees, the Orioles, the Phillies, the Dodgers, and probably the Braves are 100% buyers. And you've got about a handful of teams like the Rockies, the Marlins, the White Sox. I'm leaving a few out that are just the A's, that are just 100% sellers. But then you've got the large majority of the league that's right there in the middle, and it could go either way. Like, they could catch a hot streak and be, leading the wild card race, and all of a sudden they're in a position to buy. They could catch a cold streak, and now all of a sudden they're out of the playoff race in position to sell. Teams like the Mets, teams like I said, the vast majority of the league, teams like the Red Sox, who the Phillies are playing now. It could go either way. So I do think that the market will be more clear a month or so from now, right around the All-Star break, and that's when conversations will get more serious. I could see them going after outfield help if Castellanos doesn't get hot, because I think if Castellanos continues to struggle, then it becomes more difficult to tolerate, less offense in center field, let's say, from Rojas. So one thing impacts another. If you're getting no offense out of catcher for a little while, and maybe Real Muto is slower than a month, we'll see. Maybe you need to upgrade your offense in another area until he gets back. So I do think a lot of these things, Sir Anthony Dominguez seems to have turned things around a little bit. But if a month from now, someone in your bullpen, whether it's him or someone else, looks a little shaky, maybe the bullpen's the way to go. So I do think that they have their eye on a few potential areas, but I don't think anything is close to crystallizing yet as far as what they'll pursue and who they'll go after, because the market is still very fluid.
Yeah, I guess, Alvarado, he's been closing. Do they view him as the closer? Is there somebody else? Do they like Hoffman? I've been a big Kerkering guy. I know he's been kind of dominant recently here. Like, do they kind of say, hey, we're just waiting until this guy kind of bounces over, or do they feel like they got to add that one more bullpen arm for late in the game?
I don't know. I think right now, as we speak, they're fairly happy with their bullpen, because what are you going to do? Like, who are you going to move out of there? You just rattled off a bunch of names: Alvarado, Hoffman, Dominguez, Kerkering, Strahm, who's been unbelievable. It's a pretty full bullpen with guys that you want in there. Look, even Soto, right? I know Soto blew up in London on Sunday, and the numbers aren't great. But if you look, it's like the numbers are inflated because he's had some big ones. But the large majority, he's been, of those appearances, he's been fine. He's been okay. So I don't know if that's if that's number one on their list right now. And as far as who closes the games, I don't think they've ever wanted to designate a closer, at least since Rob Thompson took over. That's kind of been one of his signatures, is that he likes the fact that he could close with 3 or 4 or 5 different guys. And it's frustrating, I'm sure, for fantasy baseball fans who want to pick a Phillies closer. But the way he runs his bullpen, one day if he likes Alvarado in the ninth against a certain pocket of a lineup, he'll go that way. If he likes a righty in the ninth against a pocket of the lineup, he'll go with Hoffman, or Kerkering. So I'd be a little bit surprised if, last year it kind of fell to Kimbrel as kind of the closer because Alvarado got hurt and he didn't have his full complement of guys out there, and Hoffman was still emerging, and Kerkering was in Double-A at this point last year and didn't know how quickly he was going to move. He wasn't really on the radar till September. So I think it kind of fell to Kimbrel because he was the most available guy back there. But when he's got his full complement of guys, I don't think he feels the need to declare one of them the ninth inning guy.
All right. Well, 10 games up. We covered a lot. By the way, Marsh back soon, you think? I'm a little surprised by how fast Marsh sounds.
Yeah, it sounds like it's getting close. It sounds like it could be by next week, maybe. Off the top of my head, I don't know when he's eligible. I guess he'd be eligible kind of sort of right around now, right? Because I think it was last Monday that he went on the IL. It sounds like it's going to be sooner than later. When he got hurt, they said mild strain and much less of a concern than Turner's was. So yeah, I mean, it looks as though it could be when they get home. I don't know if it'll be as early as Baltimore, but certainly when they get home.
All right, Scott Lauber, everybody, from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Of course, the Phillies and the Red Sox. Your old stomping ground. No Boston for you. A little jet lag for Scott. But they'll be cruising down to Baltimore this weekend to take on a very good Orioles team, and we'll have all that coverage for you here on the Sports Best. Thanks, Scott.
You bet. Anytime.
Scott's great as always. A lot of great insight.